Hi students, welcome to lesson 19, Islamization in India. Now let us start with the introduction. The history of India furnishes an amazing picture of the synthesis of many divergent cultural trends which were gradually transformed by a process of mutual adjustment and assimilation. Islam played a significant role in this by contributing to India's multicultural and multi-religious ethos, embedding the subcontinent in the Arab Islamic maritime civilization, stretching from southern Africa to China, particularly in connecting Africa as well as the Turkic empires of Central Asia. It shows a pertinent example of the interaction of human minds and the effects of cultural and civilizational contacts on indigenous customs, the religion, literature and arts. This is observed as the impact of Islam in the Indian peninsula from three different angles: its political predominance, its intellectual and cultural impact, and finally its influence on arts and architecture. Let us have a look on the objectives of the lesson. To know the meaning of Islamization, to study the impact of Islamization in Indian society, now let us observe the process of Islamization. Indian society underwent social change due to the waves produced by the establishment of the Muslim military and political power in India. The Muslim impact on Indian society had been considerable, and realistic interpretation of social change in Hindu social structure and organization. The process of Islamization covers three types of movements in cultural status and upward the cultural and social mobility in the status of groups through conversion to Islam. Second one is the movements towards orthodoxy in cultural and religious matters among the converts to Islam, and the adoption of some Islamic cultural values and styles of life by non-Muslims either for reasons of expediency and profit or because of cultural contact. Islamization as a form of cultural system provided access to the highest social status, power and profit. Conversion to Islam under these circumstances gave an easy and shorter route to status enhancement. Islamization as a process of status mobility within the Islamic social structure has many equivalents of those characterizing Sanskritization. In both the processes, mobility in status is odd through adoption of names and the customs of culturally highly placed groups. In both situations, the economic status of the reference model is and has been traditionally of a superior nature. Islamization was also a means to increase movement among the Indian Muslims towards new identity formulation based on rigorous espousal of orthodox Islamic principles in their socio-cultural life and conscious rejection of elements as were relics of their Hindu antecedents. Many Muslim communities which were converted from lower Hindu caste had continued to remain their cultural links with Hinduism and its festivals, deities and rituals. Many observed the rituals of both the religions. In such way, the local level tradition of Islam came to be symbiotically integrated with the local tradition of Hinduism. In this way, a revivalist movement for Islam, which started with the objective of freeing the Indian Islamic cultural traditions from Hindu influences. Thus, Islamization in the form of revivalism intensified identity consciousness within the core of Muslims, and the Muslim population breaking their cultural ties existing with Hinduism. Islamization was disguised politico-cultural movement as a movement of revivalism of basic values in the Islamic tradition, reinforced the conservative aspects. Hindu communities during the Muslim rule borrowed and adopted their cultural patterns ranging from food habits, style of dress, the observing of parda to the learning of Urdu. They adopted Muslim culture, learned their language and literature, molded the domestic life according to the Muslim way of life. Islamization operated as a form of anticipatory socialization in the culture of dominant ruling community, which at that time had a higher position but also served as an instrument of access to higher offices and material benefits. Theories purporting to explain the growth of Islam in India may be reduced to 4 basic modes of reasoning. Each is inadequate. The first of these, which should be called as the immigration theory, is not really a theory of conversion, but at the same time it is, since it views Islamization in terms of the discussion not of belief but of people. In this view, the bulk of India's Muslims were descended from other Muslims who had either migrated overland from the Iranian plateau or sailed across the Arabian Sea. Although some such process no doubt contributed to Islamization of those areas of South Asia that are geographically contiguous with the Iranian plateau or Arabian Sea. This argument cannot, for reasons to be discussed, but it is used to explain mass Islamization in Bengal. The oldest theory of Islamization in India, which shall we call the religion of the sword thesis, stresses the role of military force in the diffusion of Islam in India and elsewhere, dating at the least from the time of the Crusades, and this idea received big boost during the 19th century, the high tide of European imperial domination over the Muslim people, and subsequently in the context of worldwide Islamic reform movements of the late 20th century. Its general tone is captured in the way many 19th and 20th century the Orientalists explained the rise of Islam in 7th century, that is in Arabia. Islamization had ever been a function of military or political force. One would expect that those areas exposed most intensively and over the longest period to rule by Muslim dynasties, that is, those that were most fully exposed to the sword would today contain the greatest number of Muslims. Yet, the opposite is the case, as those regions where the most dramatic Islamization occurred, such as eastern Bengal or western Punjab, which lay on the fringes of Indo-Muslim rule, where the sword was weakest and where brute force could have exerted the least influence. In this region, the first accurate census reports put the Muslim population at below between 70 and 90% of the total, whereas in the heartland of Muslim rule in the upper Gangetic plain, the domain of the Delhi fort and the Taj Mahal, where Muslim regimes had ruled the most intensively and for the longest period of the time, the Muslim population ranged from only 10 to 15%. In other words, the subcontinent as a whole, there is an inverse relationship between the degree of Muslim political penetration and the degree of Islamization. Even within Bengal, this principle holds true. A third theory commonly advanced to explain Islamization in India is what is called the religion of patronage theory. This is the view that Indians of the pre-modern period converted to Islam in order to receive some non-religious favor from the ruling class, which relieves from the taxes, promotion in the bureaucracy and so forth. This theory has always found favor with Western trained secular social scientists that see any religion as a dependent variable of some non-religious agency, in particular an assumed desire for social improvement or prestige. Many instances in Indian history would appear to support this theory. In the early 14th century, Ibn Battuta reported that Indians presented themselves as new converts to the Khilji sultans, who in turn rewarded them with robes of honor according to their rank. According to 19th century census, many landholding families of Upper India had declared themselves Muslims in order to escape imprisonment for non-payment of revenue or to keep ancestral lands in the family. The theory might even be stretched to include groups employed by the Muslim rulers that assimilated much Islamic culture even if they did not formally convert. The Kayasthas and Khatris of Gangetic Plain, the Parsis of Maharashtra and the Amils of Sindh all cultivated Islamic culture while meeting the government need clerks and administrative servants, a process that Aziz Ahmed once compared with 19th and 20th century westernization, the acculturation of captured soldiers or slaves perhaps formed another dimension of this process. Severed from their families and with no permanent socio-cultural ties to their native homes, these men not surprisingly fell into the cultural orbit of their patrons. Although this thesis might help explain the relatively low incidence of Islamization in India's political heartland, it cannot explain the massive conversions that took place along the political fringe, as the Punjab or Bengal, and the political patronage like influence of the sword would have a decreased rather than increased as one moved away from the centers of that patronage. To this end, a fourth theory, which is called as the religion of social liberation thesis, is generally pressed into service, created by British ethnographers and historians, elaborated by many Pakistani and Bangladeshi nationals, and subscribed to by countless journalists and historians of South Asia, especially the Muslims. This theory has for long been the most widely accepted explanation of Islamization in the subcontinent. The theory postulates a Hindu caste system that is unchanging through time and rigidly discriminatory against its own lower orders. For centuries, it is said, the latter suffered under the crushing burden of oppressive and tyrannical high caste Hindus, especially the Brahmins. Then when Islam arrived in Indian subcontinent carrying its liberating message of social equality as preached by Sufi sheikhs, these same oppressed caste seeking to escape the yoke of Brahminic oppression and aware of social equality hitherto denied them converted to Islam in masses. Now, let us have a look on the impact of Islamization on Indian society. Formalism and authoritarianism dominated religions and cultural life. No innovative religions writings like ideas or commentaries were contributed by the intellectuals. The Shakas, Hunas and the Gurjars put an end to the golden age of the Gupta dynasty. However, these foreigners gradually adopted Hindu religion and culture. These invaders called themselves the descendants of Kshatriyas. This was the beginning of the Rajput culture, art, literature, poetry and drama. Malwa, Kanauji, Bengali, Kashmir, Ajmer, Gwalior, Chittor, Ranthambore and Mandu were the places not only of Rajput chivalry but also of new culture, architecture and literature. So, in South India remained stable during this period and therefore did not experience political disintegration like the north. The Cholas ruled the whole of the peninsular India, and the historians Tarachand in his book The Influence of Islam on Indian Culture observes that social and cultural rivalism in the south was due to impact of Islamic culture. The Muslim Arabs the trade relations with South India for many centuries before the emergence of Islam in India. But Indo-Iranian maritime trade had reached its peak. Some of these foreign traders had even settled in Sri Lanka and on the coast of Malabar. Some Arab Muslims also went to Sindh and Gujarat, but their impact was limited. However, from the 12th century AD, one observes a definite impact of Islamic culture on Indian society. Hindu and Muslim represent two different cultures, and the world views and way of life Islamic and Hindu traditions have interacted. They synthesized and also remained insulated. According to 𝗧𝗦𝗔𝗧 mentions three major stages of Islamic traditions in India. These are: 1. The duration of Islamic rule in India. Second one is during the British domination and during the Indian freedom movement up to India's independence and the country's partition. The first stage is marked by conflict, tension, adaptation and cultural syncretism between the Hindu and the Islamic tradition. The Muslim rulers carried out religious warfare jihad with the help of ulemas. The Muslims assimilated many Hindu practices. On the other hand, Indian society and culture was influenced by Islamic tradition to a very large extent. The impact of Islam on Indian culture was both negative and positive. Islam was indirectly responsible for making Hindu society caste-ridden and exclusive. The Hindu women was veiled and sati was made stricter. Child marriage became more popular. Now let us observe the negative impact. The Muslim occupation of India accelerated certain undesirable tendencies that had already manifested themselves in the Hindu society on the eve of Muslim conquest. As pointed out by K.M. Panikkar, Indian society was divided on a vertical basis due to introduction of Islam and Muslim rule. Before 13th century, Hindu society was divided horizontally. Neither Buddhism nor Jainism could affect this division, but both were easily assimilated. On the contrary, Islam split Indian society into two distinct divisions from top to bottom, Hindus and Muslims. In due course, these two sections evolved as two separate nations in the same country. Two parallel societies were vertically established on the same soil. The proselyting zeal of Islam strengthened bonds of conservatism in the orthodox circles of their outlook and practice than what they were in past. To fortify their position against the propagation and spread of Islam, the Hindus introduced many social taboos of caste rules were more made rigid. Under the impact of Islam, continuous progress disappeared from the life of Hindus. First one is the Parda system. Muslim rule seriously affected the position of Indian women. The birth of a girl was looked upon as an inauspicious event. Consequently, female infanticide spread widely among the Hindus. This was also adopted by the Hindus in order to avoid the risk of losing their chastity by the Muslims. The Parda system, the seclusion of women from men, unknown in early days of Hindu rule, was introduced in the Hindu society. women generally lived in seclusion in sphere of their homes. The second one is child marriages and the sati system. Child marriage was introduced in society gradually. Child marriage was enforced. Early marriage of the Hindu girls to avoid their kidnapping by the Muslims became the custom. System of sati was another social evil of this period. During Muslim rule, the inhuman practice of sati was started and the women were expected to observe strictly the fidelity in their conjugal life. The condition of the Hindu women deteriorated considerably. The dependence of women on their male relatives or husbands became the prominent feature of the Hindu society. Next one is the slavery, an unhealthy feature of social life that crept into the Hindu society due to Muslims was the slavery. Slavery was common in the Muslim tradition. It was a practice among the sultans, the amirs and the nobles to keep both men and women slaves. This influenced the Hindu chiefs to keep slaves and hence slavery appeared in India due to Muslims. There are more rigid caste systems. The missionary zeal of Islam, which aimed at converting the Hindus to Muslims, compelled the Hindus to be orthodox in outlook and practice to protect their religion and culture from the onslaught of Islam. Hence, attempts were made to make caste rules more rigorous and daily rules of conduct more rigid. Restrictions regarding caste and marriage had become more stringent among the Hindus. New rules with regard to caste and marriage were also prescribed. Conversions. When Hindu society became more rigid and conservative, the miseries of lower caste increased to a large extent. Due to this reason, lower caste Hindus, particularly the untouchables, converted to Islam. The next one is the positive impact. The positive aspects of the impact of Islam on Indian society. The religious impact, where Islam brought to India a conception of human equality, pride in one's religion, a legal system which was in many ways an advance on the courts of the time. Hindu rulers were influenced to work as the upholders of Hindu religion. Islam gave the message of universal brotherhood, introduced equality in society, rejected caste system and untouchability. The impact on upper class Hindu, where the rich Hindu classes were influenced by the Mohammedan dress, etiquette, recreation and other activities. The art of warfare was also influenced and developed as a result of Islamic contact. Food of Muslims like biryani, kebab and the palan etc. were adopted by the Hindus. Next one is the music, where Indian music and musical instruments were also influenced by Islam. Indian musical instruments were modified and new instruments were produced. The tabla was produced by modification of Hindu musical instrument, mridanga, and Indian veena was combined with the Iranian tambura and sitar was produced. A fusion of Hindu and Iranian system of music led to the evolution of light songs like qawwalis, and the different classical vocal music of India underwent radical changes as a result of the contact with Muslim singers. The architecture, assimilation and synthesis between Hindu and Islamic culture led to evolution of new styles of architecture. According to Dr. 𝗧𝗪𝗓, the craftsmanship, The ornamental richness and general design remained largely the Hindu, and the arcade form, the plain domes, smooth faced walls and spacious interiors were Muslim impositions. In the field of architecture, new styles started, of which the Red Fort, Jama Masjid, Qutub Minar, Taj Mahal, etc. are the living examples. The art and craft, where the new art and the crafts were introduced in the country. For example, paper making, the enamelings, the metals and the jewels, etc. Many workshops were set up for gold and silver articles and embroidery. The Mughal rulers except Aurangzeb patronized architecture, fine art and the paintings. Under Jahangir, painting received considerable fillip. Now, the language and literature. Hindu-Muslim contact led to linguistic synthesis. Urdu is the outcome of a mixture of Persian, Arabic and Turkish words and of ideas with the concepts and languages of Sanskrit origin. The Hindu became language of the people. The Hindi language was also influenced by Muslim contact. This is distinct in vocabulary, grammar, similes and styles. Literature in India was influenced by the Turco-Afghans to a large extent. Books like Hasan Nizami's 𝗬𝗏 Qazi Minhaj us Sirats, Tabaqat-e-Naziri, etc. influenced the Hindus. Many good works were composed and written in Hindi, Bengali, Gujarati and Marathi, etc. Many Arabized Persian language words found in their way into the local languages. Long association brought the two distinct groups of the Hindus and Muslims closer and closer, with the result that the evolution of the Hindu culture was colored with Islamic theme. But the Hindu culture in its own turn influenced the Islamic elements. It is a fact that Hindus and Muslims have contributed to the evolution of common cultural heritage in India. Now let us sum up. Islam played a significant role in this by contributing to India's multicultural and multi-religious ethos. The process of Islamization covers three types of movements in cultural status: an upward cultural and social mobility in the status of groups through conversion to Islam, movements towards orthodoxy in cultural and religious matters amongst the converts to Islam, and adoption of some Islamic cultural values and styles of life by non-Muslims, either for reasons of expediency and profit or because of cultural contact. Thank you.